Hi, welcome everybody. I'm going to be talking about the Web Payment Request API. I'm going to go through a little bit of examples, and just so I get a very good feeling of the crowd, please raise your hand if you have ever heard about the Web Payment Request API before. Okay. All right, coming. We still have time. All right, raise your hand. Let me just make sure I have it over here. Tune. It's this one. Boom. And just making sure that the presentation is centered. I need a little bit of help. Boom.
On that stage, it's always ambitious.
A second, I'll move it over there.
Yeah, just try to move it. It was there, just. Ah, you have 3 screens. Okay, that's a little bit too much, I guess. I don't know. Let's arrange it then at least like that. And okay.
Well, we got that one sorted out, so let's move that. Oh, so just move this one. Okay. Boom. Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that.
Cool beans. Let's go.
All right. So, awesome. So, we're going to be talking about the Web Payment Request API. I did a quick request of hands. Let's do it again, just so I get another feeling, because we had a new people ahead. So, can we raise your hand if you have heard about this API before? So, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, good. Now, raise your hand if you have ever bought anything online. So see, it's going to be an interesting topic for you. Now, if you have ever bought anything online, I'm going to imagine you brought it something from your, like through your desk or your PC, but have you ever bought anything online with your mobile application, with a mobile phone? All right, there's a lot of people. Now, did you do it? I'm going to assume that you do it with an app, but can you raise your hand if you do it on a web browser, if you bought anything online with a web browser? All right. So there's a lot of very trustful people. All right. So the Web Payment Request API, to me, is very fascinating because it really gives us a lot of options in the web that had never been, so to speak, before. Whenever you bought anything online, whenever you perform a checkout operation, you usually have to rely on the merchant to provide that experience, right? I'm going to be talking a little bit of why. Let's make sure that we're on the right page. Boom. All right. Awesome. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about what is the Web Request API and why do we need it and how it is important. As I just did a little feeling, I think everybody agrees that there's a very high need to perform merchant operations and e-commerce operations in all sort of platforms, not only on mobile devices, not only on web browsers, not only on mobile web browsers, but in all those experiences that you need to make sure that everything is being displayed properly. The Web Payment Request API is intent to have the ability to have this standard across all these multiple devices. And the reason why we care about this is because in reality, mobile experience is the way, as of today, we consume our media most common. Even though all of us use our computers or any other kind of devices to perform all sort of interactions, I will say that mobile portal devices is one of the most common ways that we consume web information nowadays. There's a lot of institutions that they are doing very interesting research on how that affects e-commerce experience. One of the very good statistics that you're going to be seeing over and over again is that although e-commerce is a very big phenomenon, as you see, everybody has already bought something online, that doesn't mean that the same experience is going on mobile. There is this impression that the mobile e-commerce experience is not as good, that maybe when you're buying in a browser, there's some insecurity that you don't feel necessarily to pull out your card. But the reality is that there is a very high % rate. A lot of people put it between 60 to 70%. There was a very good study by Weimar Institute that they do this research on e-commerce, that even though you have convinced the user to really go and take him from his hand to go to the shopping cart, that doesn't mean that he will stay to the very end and he will just quit, right? So this is not a new problem. This is something that we have known for a few years. And what e-commerce or merchants have been doing for the past few years in order to try to ease users' experience. And one of the very good ideas the browsers put, I would say 2-3 years ago, were autofills, right? So if you already save your information, you already put your credit card, you already put your name, your address, everything, the browser should be smart enough to pick that information, and that way we ease the user experience to not make him, oh, I need to put the same information all over again. However, sometimes that is not the best experience, because, I mean, as you say, for instance, I've been very lucky. I live in a few countries here and there, and sometimes I put like the address that I need to purchase, like, oh, when I'm in Switzerland, oh, when I'm in Mexico, when I'm in the US, and I just don't remember. I know that it's not that common of an experience, but the reality is sometimes we might have to add a few edge cases that autofill just doesn't really cover all of them. This is a good example that, for instance, we have these places, and we have no way to know whether the first name that you entered many years ago actually reflects the address you want that being shipped, or maybe the address that is actually someone else's that I put in your apartment. But you have recorded that in your computer, and now you have to figure out how that works, right? So what are we going to do, or how we can solve this, right? And for that, we do have the Web Payment Request API. At the end of the day, it's just a UI. It's a standard UI, as I mentioned before, that allows us to have a same cross-browser experience. And I'm gonna mention like a same cross-browser experience. I'm gonna even include Internet Explorer, believe it or not. I know there's some people what, but it's actually true. So for instance, one of the latest builds from, I think, Edge, Internet Explorer Edge, has already implemented the Web Request API. Ever since version, I think over 61, if I'm not correct. You have already that in your browsers. Some of your mobile browsers are already able to consume and perform and showcase you these UI forms natively. What that means is you don't have to provide any UI on your own. You don't have to craft that with like CSS, making sure that the address is filled properly, that the name is actually tied, and the zip code is formatted. All that stuff is already been included in the browser, and that gives us a great advantage. If you see like over right, we can already distinguish like, oh, John Smith has a MasterCard, and we don't need to necessarily do the checksum to make sure that, oh, this is a MasterCard. We have already, oh, its shipping information is being nightly and properly displayed with the browser because they have been taken into considerations when doing this specification. You can set up the shipping options. You can show specific details of the totals. The one that I'm showcasing at the left with Chrome has even more detailed information, and you can specify all of those information and pass that to the browser. So whenever a user goes ahead and just starts filling that information, it gets stored in the browser. And even more, if you have that already stored, I'm going to be showing a few examples later on, you can just pick and allow the browser to pick that instead of having to make sure you do that on your own. Let's go. How that looks code-wise. So code-wise, it's very simple API. It's just an object, pretty much. It's just a method you pass a bunch of specifications in JSON. You can modify that depending on whatever framework or library you've been using. You can modify and tie that to any sort of library you want to have. But at the end of the day, it just supports a few parameters as objects that you want to use. Some of I'm going to point over on the top that's the method. You can check on that object tied to the window element in JavaScript, and then you can start passing some of the methods. One of the important parts is being able to showcase what providers or car providers you want to have. There's a few. As of today, there's still a lot of development. This is a very cutting-edge API because there's still a lot of discussion what providers are being able to be used. As of today, I think even Android Pay or Apple Pay are being able to be wrapped within the browser. So you can specify all of that in the object. The next one is the display items. And that is pretty much showcasing, it's your shopping cart. You are crafting the UI for the user to being able to have the shopping cart and being able to have these different values added up through the shopping cart. You can add positive, negative values, modify them as you pass by. And finally, the total you can specify, of course, the same values you're doing on your currency, you do display of the total. One thing that is important to know is that, so this is just the UI. It won't do any math for you. So if you on the total completely mess up the value that you have on display totals, the UI is just going to show it to you. So it's only a way to showcase nicely how that works for a lot of people, right? So I'm going to show the first demo. Let's pray to the demo. God's everything is going to be fine. Boom, boom, boom. Let's see. So far. All right, the game, right? So the first one is it's a demo showcasing how you can craft this API. Now, as I mentioned, this is already on version of a few different versions of Chrome, and there's a lot of code over here that you can see. So, for instance, I previously showed, those are the networks that are supported, those are the methods that are supported, the cards, how you donate. And so whenever I click over here, this is how it looks. And this is already on the browser. So I didn't have to specify any of the UI. I didn't have to specify whether there's a left pattern, the right pattern, how the label goes. The browser itself has all that knowledge inside of it. And you only specify the objects that it requires, and you take it on. And that way, it already does that. As I mentioned, you don't need to do, it won't do any math for you. It will just allow you to set all the information. Everything is in this nicely tied up UI. We're going to go here. I can pick between different cars. Of course, I'll take advantage of some of the elements that we already used in terms of saving information. I don't have to put information over again. I just need to give that information over. Then let's see, let's do quick pay, right? And it will double check, like, I need your CVC or something like that. I mean, this is a card that was just like super simple, so I'm able to do that. It will process that information. It will send that. For instance, you can see all that information here in the browser. Again, because it's client-side technology, what this does is just grabs that information and you just pass it. At the moment, I'm just sending it back forward to the browser, but ideally you want to tie it over to some server system, some payment gateway, or anything that allows you to be able to process that information from a Stripe, either Stripe, Brain3, or any other provider you might use in order to process that. This makes things way easier in a way that you can literally set up a checkout commerce, because one of the harder parts is the UI. And then if you are able to leverage in other third-party providers that have managed to process the server-side logic, you can definitely engage yourself in very, very good user experiences. All right, let's go forward. Ooh. So all that is super cute, right? But I've been working on this API for some time, and I always wonder, well, that's pretty nice, but what real use cases do we have for that? And as I mentioned initially, I think the ideal target of the mobile API was, of the web payment request API, was increase the mobile conversion, and it was very well targeted for desktop devices. However, the more you onboard mobile devices, you realize it makes a lot of sense for mobile experiences. So the use case that I really like was for mobile music consumption. So nowadays, most of us have maybe, let's say, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Music, everything that allows us to consume our music from a provider, right? However, some of you that you still recognize, what is this? I know I'm pretty sure my nieces won't even know what is this. They will probably, think that's the same way that you save a document in Microsoft Word is like, what is this little object with this little disk? But no, this is how a lot of people used to use in music back in the days. And if you were maybe a popular artist, or maybe you wanted to get yourself known, what you will do is you will record a mixtape, put in this little cassette, will hand it to your friends, or maybe will sell it to your friends, and that's actually the original sharing of files. Now, of course, we can share, you know, the Spotify link, but the entire kind of purchase process is a little bit trickier because you don't necessarily buy directly from the artist. You need to wait a little bit or just maybe use this third-party provider. Whereas many years ago, I mean, there's very famous artists, I think probably all of you know Eminem, which is making a lot of the news lately. He initially reached Dr. Dre through like just a mixtape that you just literally handed over, and then that's how he gave his initial interview for getting where he is right now. But we don't have that experience right now. We just have like a bunch of mobile devices. We just have a bunch of streaming applications, and we are losing this kind of like user experience of handing over music. So when I thought about it, when I was describing the possible use cases for the Web Payment Request API, I really like the idea of trying to mimic this experience. So if you were talking a little bit about from the 70s, you record your music in multiple cassettes, that someone tried that music and then, you know, just sell it, and then, you know, that's how you put your name out there. What if you could do something like that? Instead of necessarily uploading your music to any of the music providers, you just host it on your own, and there we have the Web Audio API, which although mobile is still a bit tricky, you can do a lot of things. You can allow them to try them on their mobile devices, and if they like it, they can buy it directly from you. And if you host your own e-commerce shop, you can literally just download it and buy them. And that's going to be what I'm going to be showcasing later. How that looks. So what I wanted to represent from a tape perspective was like if you have a bunch of business cards with like QR codes to the URL of your music, you could just hand them over, right? And then your friends could just pull out your mobile phone, do a little quick scan of your music, and then eventually go to the browser, right? From the browser, you just perform, like you allow the browser to do its task. You can preview the song and start a payment request flow, and that request flow includes the Web Payment Request API. And from there, if, you know, let's say the person is really decided on your music, you can just buy it right away. And you don't have to craft an entire e-commerce. You don't have to pay another third-party company to just do all these handshakes. You probably still need to take care of the payment gateway, because as I mentioned, it's only the UI. It's not server-side logic that allows the user to perform like peer-to-peer payments. It's not that advanced. And yeah, and finally, when that information is being sent back to the server, you're able to give that to whatever payment gateway you are using, and then the response you get it back, you can do whatever you want. So I'm just gonna showcase this little thing now. For this one though, I'm gonna plug my phone. So I think here, if you go here, you're gonna see, it's my cousin. Trying to make a living out of a musician. I'm not so sure how is he doing like that, but we're going to hope that it's best. All right, that's enough. All right, it didn't stop. Huh, that's funny. I swear to God, I'm not trying to give him free advertising. That is just a preview. It's supposed to stop anytime now. All right, there you go. All right, well, that was my cousin. If you want to buy his music, it's online on this website. No, but let's go back here. And what you can see here is there is this little button that is being covered by my dog. Oh, there you go. See, I'm getting the hang of this. It only took me like 7-8 years of JavaScript experience to be able to do this. This is tied to my Stripe account. If you actually buy that, I'm not going to charge you, don't worry. It's all tied with a test Stripe API. But I'm just going to showcase how easy it is to actually perform all these operations. I'm going to show you the code. I'm going to show you everything. At the end of the day, I'm just doing the order summary over here. So you can see I defined that it's directly on the code. This is the name of the song. I'm using one of my debit cards. This is my contact information. There you go, like a bunch of numbers. And then, you know, when I pay, it just asks me for my credit card, and then eventually will just give me back the song. How does the code look like? So I'm just going to go very quickly and go right away over here, show you the real code. I mean, you know, this is a coding conference, right? So let's see. Whoop, whoop, whoop. All right, beautiful code. Yay. So I built everything with React. I don't know how familiar you guys are with React. There's not much that you need to be very familiar. I think the only part that it's maybe relevant here is I'm just literally passing the amount of money I'm going to charge that person. In this case, is the demo is the total amount. I'm using a component. I'm using a Stripe React components. They don't work on mobile. They work amazingly on desktop. They're working on mobile. They're going to be working on mobile very soon. But I only pass that information. I pass the data to, I use a Stripe token API. So what it does is I wrap all that information, send that to Stripe, which is just using their own API. I get that back in like a very tightly packaged object. I send it back with Stripe. I don't need to handle any credit card information. I don't need to handle any particular information. I just can literally just send all that stuff to Stripe and then just leverage on the API. And then what I do is just pretty much here use the handler from the UI in order to pass it over for the server. Yeah, so that is the client. The server looks a little bit like this, right? So the server, I am loading all this information, my private key from Stripe. I'm listening to the specific endpoint. I'm using Node.js and Express, and at the moment I'm just literally just grabbing that information. And if you see, one of the very big benefits of that is I don't need to parse their shipping address. I don't need to parse their email. I don't need to parse their contact information. I don't need to parse their credit card. I don't need to make sure that they're using a fake credit card. All that stuff is already being handled. I mean, at this moment for Stripe, but not only for that, the token that the Stripe is generating is being tied, and this is all the code I need in order to be able to actually perform this transaction and just charge you guys like $1 for my cousin's information, right? I'm going to show you a little bit of how that looks on the back end of a Stripe. As you can see, I did a lot of tests. Like a lot of tests. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's, if I only show you, probably there was 3-4 blocks of code, and I'm already able to gather financial information, credit card information natively in the browser. I'm able to send that information to a third-party provider, such as Stripe. You can leverage, there's so many of them. But I decided to use Stripe because, for instance, if I pick one of these payments accounts, I don't need to handle any of that. It's just Stripe just makes sure that handles all that stuff. I don't work for Stripe, by the way. It's just the way that it was very, very handy for me to use, right? And this definitely lowers the entry level for anybody that wants to sell or perform e-commerce operations. Before, when I was started doing JavaScript, or many years ago, you literally had to code all these by hand. All those forms, like forms that were this big, you had to process every element, validate the dates, validate everything. Now the browser is taking care of us, and it was only done with a few lines of code, right? Let me now, so we're going to go back here. Now I'm going to show you something, because the browser looks good, but we are not here only interested for the browser. We're interested here because it also works on mobile, assuming I'm doing everything properly. You'll have to bear with me for a second, because I'm connecting everything. All right. So this is my iPhone. I pick an iPhone up for any particular reason. It's just because it's just QuickTime Player is able to put play really quickly in all those devices super nicely. But I'm going to show you. Look, That's a bad idea. I made sure I put my, like, yeah, let's put like 400 people on my password. No. So I'm using the Chrome because at the moment the Safari is not implemented any of that yet. Firefox is working on it, but you can definitely test it as of today with Internet Explorer and Chrome. And I mean, at the moment, I don't know if you can see, it has this the yellow stuff because it's the Chrome beta version. However, you don't. I think the current version is already has it. But when I was testing it, it's a very cutting-edge API. So I go over here. I just ignore that. It's the same setup, the same website as you see. I'm just coming over there. I'm not gonna do preview. You already heard that. But if I click pay, you see that, and it's like, Jesus Christ, people. We have an internal one. So you can see the payment. You can see the Visa card. You can see the same thing that you are seeing in the previous. Oh, of course I'm here. And everything is handled in the mobile phone. So if you know what this means, it means you don't have to build responsive e-commerce checkout cards. Are you excited or not? Because I am. It's like, yes, thank you, yeah. I'm very appreciative, guys, that clapped. There was at least one person that was like, yes. Like one guy that really spent like 2 Sundays just making sure it looks pretty good and like sell mobile device. But that's pretty exciting. I found it a very interesting API. It's very cutting edge at the moment, so there's still a lot of releases going on. At the moment, for instance, they have a lot of discussion on what kind of currencies they can accept, because all the currencies, I mean, they are some ICO 4789, I don't remember, you can misquote me on that one. But for instance, those currencies are based on 3-letter codes. And for instance, if at some point you want to pay, I don't know, Bitcoins or Dogecoins, some of them might have 4 letters, and then the web browser needs to be like, should I accept your Dogecoins or not? And that gets a little bit tricky, you know. It's the thing that we developers spend a lot of hours discussing. I'm gonna go back to the presentation now. All right, so what's next? This was just, so just to make sure I'm very clear, this, what I described was the payment request API. This is all this object that handles all this application, all this UI, that it's able to provide you this beautiful UI. However, there are more, I'm actually gonna click on those. There's more descriptions and this very amazing specifications by the W3C and how you can, you know, use specific methods. So for instance, at the moment, they need to specify the general version. They cannot just specify, oh, you know, how will Apple Pay work? How will Android will work? Maybe you want to, at some point, perform your own protocol to do payments, and maybe at some point you can do actually peer-to-peer payments just on browser technology. All the things are being specified in more specific APIs, such as the payment methods identifiers API. I would recommend to everybody take a look at that. I didn't decide to not speak about it because it's going to take a lot of time, and it's still an editor's draft, so it's also very important to be aware of at what stage some APIs are. The request API, it's already a working recommendation, so it's already decided to be implemented in all browsers. So you can rely and be sure that if you are starting to work and implementing that API in your next project, it will actually stay, and you don't have to be worried that, you know, maybe Firefox pushes something on a nightly build and then boom, you're out. Some companies that I know that are already implementing it, it's Airbnb, Shopify, WooCommerce. They already implemented that both in their mobile applications and their web browser experiences. Maybe you have stumbled upon already on this before realizing. Let's go back to the slides. The method API, the handler API is even more fun to read. Yay. But it really, again, it really explains how all these protocols, how all these handshakes, how all these specifications within the browser are able to be working. And if you want to go to the longer details on how that's going to be working on the long term, I really advise you to take a look at all this API, all these requests. If you at some point are going to be developing an e-commerce shop, if you at some point are going to be developing any checkout experience, maybe your cousin is asking you to develop a music shop for whatever reason, then you should be able to implement those things, because that's a very nice way to implement that. We're getting to the very end of that. Awesome. So what else there is to be? And just what is next from that? I put a few links on the slides. I'm pretty sure we're going to publish those slides later on what to go from there. Google has a very, very, very good training for doing progressive web apps in terms of using all these cool technologies. This one, let's click on this. Yeah. This particular one, it just gives all a very good like on-hand introduction on how to use the API. Just has like a bunch of like this charts, this information. I already showed some of the things that I actually stole from there, and of course I quoted all of them though. And it just gives you a very good introduction how to use them. I really recommend that if you don't know where to start, because it's very, very cutting edge, you just definitely go and check it out. Microsoft also just recently did a presentation, and all this stuff is super new. Like the latest draft came in September 27, something like that. There is a specification like this year. Like, I was literally working on that for like 2 weeks ago. And in November, they're going to be closing some of the changes that you might be doing for currency, for instance. So if you want to have maybe at some point some cryptocurrency in there, you might want to be subscribed to mailing lists, maybe help on implementing some of the tests. And you can actually drive the conversation forward on where the implementation of this API and what can we support. I'm a little bit working on that. If you want to have more examples, because I stole some of the examples that I showcased, but there's a lot of code out there. For instance, doing payments with Android, dynamic shipping, because in the moment let's say you change, depending on the user address, you want to change how much you charge the user, shipping options, credit cards, dynamics, more, stretch with Google, everything on there is completely fine. And I'm going to close a little bit earlier, because I see a lot of people with questions. Thank you very much.